back. This is Sunday edition here on KTN News. Thank you for staying with us. Let's switch gears, but let's stay with politics. And this past week, it has been a sad week for Kenyans, for the people of the county of Murang'a. Kenneth Matiba did pass on Sunday nights, and various Kenyans have been sending their messages of condolence, visiting the family. The family is yet to speak out on the burial plans. We understand some sources indicate there are plans to have Kenneth Matiba cremated to honor his wishes of a simple kind of send-off. But we still don't have the final preparations, the final plans. Let's listen in to some of the messages of condolence that have been sent to the family of the late Kenneth Matiba.
For those who have an opportunity to see him from the outside, this was a great man, a very, very great man. And his simple words, let the people decide. Let the people decide, is perhaps the most significant clarion call for multi-party democracy in Kenya.
But Mzee Matiba suffered for all of us. He could not have suffered that much in vain. As I was coming, I was telling some of my friends, the worst thing that could happen to any country in the world is to have detention laws. And the wonderful thing we have under our Constitution 2010, for which he fought so hard, the story of Sabasaba is a story of Kenneth Matiba. Because I had privilege to serve as a young minister. Assistant minister. I was actually Matiba's assistant minister. Not many people know that. And I was very young. And I looked up to him for everything. And you know, we got our firstborn son when I was his assistant minister. And he went all the way to London to Mother's Care. Mother's Care was a very special place for watoto. Those of you are getting young kids, Mother's Care. Mother Care. And actually brought a baby cot. My wife and I remember this. And that's what stuck to us. Imagine that kind of, a lot of people serve with ministers and assistant ministers, but none of them will remember to do such kind words and kind deeds.
All right, gentlemen. Kenneth Matiba is seen as an icon of the fight for multi-party democracy in this country, the so-called second liberation. To the younger viewers, maybe, who do not remember Kenneth Matiba in his heydays, myself, I just remember him very vaguely in 1992. But I started following politics from when I was in Standard 1. but basically, Dismas, what did Matiba stand for?
We know that there are several people who are referring to him as the father of liberation. And I'm not sure whether that's accurate, because in my view, the father of liberation is Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, because he started fighting for the second liberation 3 years after independence. And you remember he's suffering with KPU. And maybe the younger generation may not be able to understand this, but they can follow it on Google. They can find out what KPU is. But really, the father of liberation in Kenya is Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and the Young Turks. Now, the Young Turks were the engine that surrounded Jaramogi Oginga Odinga to make sure that the second liberation was a reality. And it's unfortunate that those majority of the Young Turks have been neglected. A good example is Gitobi Manyara, because he kept the company of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. There was Kiraitu Murungi, there was Paul Mwite, there was Dr. Misa Kitui, James Orengo, and others. Those are the guys who went through a lot of trouble to ensure that the second liberation becomes a reality. But when the signs were very clear that President Moi was going to give in to 2A and have the amendment to make Kenya a multi-party democracy, then that's when the established politicians started trooping in. And that's why you find somebody like Simon Nyachai and Ken Matiba. But now the difference between Ken Matiba and the other politicians who sat on the face for too long, he came to the field and he made a lot of noise. Given the fact that he had a big bank balance, he was able to finance a lot of meetings. And for 2 years, he got detained. And we understand that's when he got the medical complications. But the tragedy we have today is that most of our politicians, including the one who was just spoken here, Kalonzo Musyoka, He was the deputy, was a vice president to Mwai Kibaki, when he had the opportunity of ensuring that the gentleman who bought for him a baby coat was taken good care of. Now he waits for Matiba to die and he's telling us good stories. But what did he do for the 5 years when he was Kibaki's vice president? And that's the time when we understand Matiba's empire, the business empire, was crumbling. And he was at office of the president, having tea every day with President Kibaki. And even for President Kibaki, what did he do during his 5 years when he was the president? That's the time he should have come up with some sort of fund. The other day we had people saying that these young Turks, the people who fought for our second liberation, can hardly afford medical bills. In a country like Israel, where they respect their heroes, you are given a certain medal, and this medal, when you are a recipient, you become sick, you go to any public hospital, you are given VIP treatment. It's so sad that the politicians we have today, they wait for a fella to die, then they go there, start celebrating, reminding us how they were given gifts. I mean, how would you imagine Matiba's kids, or other children and grandchildren, are feeling when they see this Kalonzo man? He was my father's assistant minister. Then he was vice president. He had a lot of powers. He had influence over Kibaki. Why couldn't they just come with a simple act of the National Assembly to say, if you ever fought for second liberation, and you know we get names through a scientific process, because if you open it up again, every Tom, Dick, and Harry will come on board. Right. But we get a scientific process where we identify these. And at this stage, we must start celebrating our heroes today before they die. For instance, there's a guy we need to celebrate today called Omtata. He's a one-man LSK. Wherever there's any public litigation, he's the one who comes to the front. But what happens? Guys wait for him in town and they club him interfering with his dental formula. We really must start recognizing our heroes today, because if you don't celebrate them today, right, according to Winston Churchill, yes, tomorrow we'll have no heroes.
Mark, Kenneth Matiba paid the ultimate price, didn't he? With his health and with the detention and his business empire collapsing, being fought, according to what people are saying?
Yes, definitely. Kenneth Matiba was the victim of that era's way of editing you out of political life. One of the things that used to happen then is by the time you were getting a job, a plum job, there was a bank called National Bank of Kenya, another one called KCB, and another one Cooperative Bank, and they'll give you a loan that was a loan on paper, but you were not supposed to pay it back until you crossed certain lines. That's when the loan would have been recalled with 20 years of interest accrued thereof. And this is how many a political career died in the day. Economic and sabotage was quite common. In fact, I know a family who were billionaires in the 80s. And then when we were growing up with them in the 90s, they were absolutely poor because a certain loan was called back. And this was the reality. But however, what I find interesting about the Kenyan political space is we find a lot of historical revisionism when it comes to the second liberation. People like Mudavadi and Kalonzo cannot dare speak about this because they were part and parcel of the system that really disgruntled Matiba, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Masinde Muliro, and of that day. They were really part and parcel of what was the problem. These are creatures of opportunity. They changed their colors based on what was going on. I can promise you, if Uhuru Kenyatta had run alone, Kalonzo would have vied to be his deputy after the election. This is the kind of person that we have. But that's the problem. We have politicians who have no ethics, have no basis, have no history of even standing up for anything, and then we expect them to change this country. What we must begin to do is we must begin to not only celebrate, but also elect leaders that have actually shown heroism. Right. That's what we need. We need to stop having this socialite, social media politicians who just know how to pose for pictures and buy jembes in
Instagram. All right, let's go back to those young Turks. You guys have said a lot about the state of the Kenyan democracy and how we are such a political country, and a lot is wrong with our politics. But going back to 1992, when that the return of multi-party politics in Kenya. So what happened then to that goodwill, the young Turks that were behind Jaramogi and the likes of Matiba? You talked about the likes of Kiraitu Murungi and Gitobi Manyama, Mukisa Kitui. Yeah. Is that where the rain started beating us as a country? Because maybe Gitobi Manyama found that it was very hard to sell Ford Kenya in his place, for example, and the likes of Paul Muite and so forth.
Yeah, to a large extent, you'd say that after the 1992 general election, we actually started a downward trend from a multi-party democracy that had a plural media that was just developing to a situation where we have a multi-ethnic, ethnicized ethnocracy, so to speak. And what happens is that a lot of politicians realize that, the journey to total liberation is almost non-existent by following people who believe in a certain ideology. And the only way to remain relevant is now to find a way of retaining our political clout within our ethnic inclinations. And I think the media also has a part to share in this, because you realize that in 1992, the media was not as plural as it is today. But then with serious plurality in the media and many parties emerging, we had a multi-party system, we had a plural media, but then the media became part and parcel of ethnicized political parties, and it became a lot more difficult to have a divergent view within an ethnicity and have a media platform to propagate that. So what the media did and the political parties did, they became ethnicized. So there was a Luo media, Luo-affiliated political party, and any other person who does not speak the language of the Luo political party is disenfranchised. And I think that is what led to the fall-off of a number of politicians, who fought much more than Kenneth Stanley Matiba in the second liberation, because they were not in position of opulence as they were fighting. So you look at what happened to Gitobi Manyara, for instance. He stuck with Raila at some point. He fell by the wayside. You look at what Ford Kenya became after 1992, when a section just retreated from Ford Kenya. It became a Bukusu political party, and it has become more powerful as a Bukusu political party and less powerful as a national political party. And even as you look at the handshake right now, you realize that the whole handshake and the shuttle diplomacy between one handshake and another is probably speaking to an ideology that failed from 1992, a reform ideology that has since disappeared. When you have one person greeting Moi, greeting Kibaki, and you look at the ideological cloth of these people, you're thinking, there's nothing ideologically significant in this. I would have expected the young Turks to regroup and say that this is 20 years down the lane. Actually, 25 years down the lane, we've achieved nothing. Can we go back to the drawing board? And we have a situation where Chris Bichage, Wanyiri Kihoro, Gitobi Manyara, Kiraitu Murungi, James Orengo, Raila Odinga, Musikari Kombo, Dr. Mukisa Kitui, teaming up and speaking a language of now, how do we take this country forward now that we have multi-party democracy? And I think that is one thing that our the younger generation do not understand. If you tell them that at some point Kiraitu Murungi was Raila's lawyer and they were in the same political party, at some point Paul Muite was well poised to take over Ford Kenya, they'll tell you no. Ford Kenya is a Bukusu political party. But that is the tragedy of what multi-party democracy and a plural media has done to Kenya. We become a lot more ethnic.
All right. Very many points you've put across there. Kipchumba, immediately the multipartyism was reintroduced in Kenya. And I remember, and I was in Standard too, I remember there was a lot of euphoria around the Forum for Restoration of Democracy. But then immediately in the same election, it was split in half, and President Moi just passed through. Is that where the rain started beating us? Was multipartyism just doomed to fail from the very start?
The rain started beating us from the point of the onset or the agenda of multi-party politics and all its formation. It had only one agenda, to remove Moi from power, which to me, that is where they started going wrong. Because when Moi was no longer an issue, they had no other agenda. That's why they started, it became an amphoteric movement. It had no way forward after Moi. When Moi left, everybody went back to their ethnic cocoon to look for something. There are two things that have killed the oomph for multi-party democracy in this country. One, the ideology of it is our time to eat. Two, the ideology that all politics is local. We have used all politics is local to tribalize and to ethnicize our politics. The second point is that we have used the ideology that it is our time to eat we view public resources and public office as a chance for us to have a bite at the cake. We do not view it as a chance for us to showcase our unique talents, our unique leadership talent, to push the Kenyan dream further. I think that is where the other mistake is. Secondly, on the issue of Njindo Matiba, may his soul rest in peace. There is this old adage that the history of the jungle will always praise the hunter until the lions have their, or the animals have their historian. Look at how fast we miss facts. Njindo Matiba was a minister in the Kanu regime, the so-called oppressive Kanu regime. He realized that in the horizon, multi-party is coming in. He jumped ship, became a multi-party hero because he was from the opulent view. Now, all of a sudden, we forget the people who started the fire when there was no house to hang in. The late Shikuku, Martin Shikuku, the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Wanyiri Kihoro, the young Turks, as my co-panelists have talked about. These are the people we need to celebrate, whether alive or dead. Yes, we agree and we must appreciate that Njindo Matiba has a position in this country. He has played a role. But we must not rewrite history to correct things that were done wrong.
All right. Let me ask, very important, let me ask you the same question. Was the late Kenneth Matiba more of Moi must go than we must have multi-party democracy?
It was more of a Moi must go. Again, you recall when it was very clear that probability of Moi becoming president was very high. An amorphous group established itself, calling itself Change the Constitution group, because they said Moi shouldn't be allowed to become president. Others referred to him as a passing cloud. But unknown to them, the passing cloud was static for 24 solid years. So a number of these people, when they saw that Moi is getting to a certain age, they said, let's kick him out of office. And that's when the rain started beating us. Because you recall in 1992, when it was very clear that now we are in multi-party politics and President Moi is going to run on a Kanu ticket, there was Ford Kenya. Now, there was an insatiable greed between two leading candidates. You had Jaramogi Oginga Odinga on one side and Ken Matiba. Ken Matiba said that let's allow all our members to come and vote for our presidential candidates. While Jaramogi said, we don't have the resources, let's have a conference. Let's have delegates coming to elect one of us. Now, because they saw that across the corner, Moi was leaving office and they were going to State House, all the ideologies disappeared. Then Jaramogi Oginga Odinga said, I'm going to run. Matiba said, I'm going to run. And before they could say Ford, there was Ford Kenya, there was Ford Asili, there was Ford People. Right now, there are mutations of Ford that you can't even count. But that tells us that those young Turks were let down by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and by Ken Matiba. Because for them, with a lot of naivety, they came out, they said, we are fighting for multi-party democracy. I mean, Kiraitu Murungi is a top lawyer. I understand he's a graduate of those Ivy schools in US, whereby his contemporaries would be people like Obama. But he said, I'm not going to private practice. I'm going to fight for multi-party democracy. That's why after they got into office, they discovered power is so sweet. Right now, when Kiraitu Murungi, you see him addressing people on national TV, and the Kiraitu Murungi who was a young Turk, you begin to wonder whether those are two personalities. And in my view, the only young Turk who has remained alive to the aspirations of Kenya is Paul Mwite, because he has really suffered. And when you speak about Mark, I mean, Mark gave an example, the way guys were frustrated. Paul Mwite is one of them. He's been having running battles with almost everybody because he's among the few Kenyans who come out and call a spade a spade. He speaks his mind. But again, President Moi warned us that you guys are pushing me to allow multi-party democracy instead of asking us to have a firm ideology. And he gave us a warning. He said Kenya is going to degenerate, the political parties are going to be tribal affiliations, and we are never ever going to witness peace. And look what is happening today. When you talk about Ford Kenya, you immediately jump to Bukusu. When you talk about Jubilee, immediately what comes to mind, TNA and URP. So these politicians do not come together because of an ideology saying, let's take Kenya to the next level. Let's be like Singapore, or let's be like, if people don't like using those examples, let's like be Botswana or Ghana. We are now driven by that insatiable appetite to accumulate wealth, which answers the question you raised earlier on. How come in Kenya, the economy is not growing, yet politicians' bank balances are growing every day? That's why the rain started beating us.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your thoughts on Kenneth Matiba and the so-called second liberation. Let me just go through some of your views here on social media, on Twitter especially. And one mastermind TGS says on Twitter, it makes no sense for any leader to fight for a liberation if we are not going to protect its achievements. Otherwise, we just go back to starting point. No progress at all. And there's one here. Patrick Napel says, unlike the former chairman, Wafula Chebukati has stood his ground. Maina was only blackmailing him despite a basic education that doesn't warrant her to chair a basic cattle dip committee. Very harsh there by Paul. And one here from Edgar Wangula says, Chebukati should step down immediately. IBC need to be washed afresh. Lot of feedback. Rotich Nehemiah says, don't I love your new panel for sure. Ati Devolution is working on social media than it is on the ground. Don Sabwa says, please, Mark, I'm getting worried when we say there is growth. What are the parameters? Do you have the number of people living below one? Are the people living below $1 a day increased? And yes, if you know that. And there's one here from Malan and West African says, are you saying then we should not say anything at all? And please go ahead and decry violence wherever it happens. He's speaking about the IBC. And one here from, yeah, those are some of your views. Keeping, of course, talking about different issues, different topics that we've been able to discuss this morning. Let's take another quick commercial break here on Sunday edition. When we return, we have our last discussion of the day. We talk about what is happening with Raila Odinga's political activity, more handshakes this week. He did meet retired President Mwai Kibaki in Muthaiga.